Today I'm going to sew a straight seam on the sewing machine. I've put the right side of the fabrics together and the raw edges of the fabric in line. Now to sew a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, which patterns all allow, there's a gauge on the machine which you use the second line. So if you place the fabric on the raw edge of the fabric on the second line with your needle in the upright position, will give you 1.5 centimetres. So lower your foot and press your pedal gently. Go forward for about 1 centimetre, then lift your stitch length to make your machine sew backwards, and then go forwards all the way, keeping your raw edge on your guideline. When you get to the end, repeat the backward stage to tie off your fabric. Put the needle in the upright position, take it off and cut your fabric. That's your basic straight seam. That will then be pressed open and your seam edges will be finished off with an overlock or a zigzag, which I'll show you later. There's 2 other sewing seams that I'm going to show you today which are self-finished, so you won't need to overlock or zigzag them afterwards. The first is the French seam, and this time you sew the seam in the same way but you put the wrong sides of the fabric together. So we're going to use 1 centimetre for the French seam, so that's the first gauge line here on the machine. So edges together, backwards and forwards. Now this needs to be trimmed down to about 3 millimetres from your stitching line, and then ideally you would press it from the other side open, but I'm just going to go without pressing for the sake of the video. Now you see you have the raw edge of the fabric on the right side. Now you're going to turn it round, so you're putting right sides together, and you'll have pressed that along the seam line, open first and then along the seam line, making sure it doesn't twist in, and then you're going to sew this as close to the raw edge as you've got, so about 5 millimetres, which is the edge of the foot lined up with the fold of your fabric. So again, backwards and forwards at the beginning. And at the end. Now that will give you a normal seam on the right side and the raw edges are enclosed on the inside, and that's called a French seam. Now the other seam I'm going to show you is a felled seam, and I've done it the same way as the French seam, as in I put the wrong sides of the fabric together and stitched a 1.5 centimetre seam. Then I've trimmed one of the edges down, only one side this time, to 3 millimetres, and I've pressed the other one under and pressed it over again. So now you're going to stitch a close seam to the edge of here. I tend to line this fold seam that you're going to sew in line with the inside of the foot, and that will give you about 1 millimetre away from the edge. Now in my rush I forgot to go backwards and forwards at the beginning. I'll do it at the end. Just make sure you do it when you sew the real thing. Okay, and that gives you a felled seam. That's a strong seam used on jeans and it gives you a finished seam on the right side and on the wrong side.